Hey, what's new and exciting? This is Kevin O'Shaughnessy here, and this video comes by request. So, Voodoo, this is for you. This is a follow-up to a video that I did a while back on how to record a guitar instrumental, and it focused on my song Brace Yourself. And Voodoo was asking if I could go through how I recorded each of the tracks and what my thought process was behind each one. So I'm just going to play you a little bit of the song, and then we'll jump right into how we recorded it. All right, so you get the idea. It's a hard rock instrumental. There's a rhythm guitars, bass, drums, and obviously a lead guitar taking the melody. So let's look at the drums first. What I ended up doing for this track. So I actually recorded this song quite a while before we actually started mixing it. And so by the time I was mixing it, I'd started learning a lot of new techniques, and I was trying to get the best sound that I could. So I was experimenting a lot. That's really the point that I'm getting to right here. And actually, let me just do one thing. I'm going to move. Oh, I want to see all of these. This is what I want to do. Okay. And so let's just listen to the drums. I'm going to delete these, or I'm going to mute rather, these subgroups right here. And here we go. Okay, so what am I doing? Well, we'll take a look at the kick drum first. So one of the things I mentioned, we were doing some experimenting on this, and I can't remember if it was because of a lack of mics or a lack of channels or a lack of processing power, but we put one mic on the kick, and it was an outside mic. We didn't actually get the beater mic. So let me just turn off the processing. There's not much. And if we listen to the kick drum mic, you'll see that it just doesn't have a lot of attack on it at all. Right? It's not a bad sound, but for a hard rock tune, it really needs a little bit more aggression. So one of the things that I needed to do, first I put a limiter on it initially just to kind of get the volume where I wanted it to be. A lot of people use compression in this stage, but sometimes I find that the attack is so quick and the release is so quick that I may as well just limit it. As long as I don't go crazy with it, it usually sounds pretty transparent. So the next thing that I did was when it came down to mixing it and processing it, was I added a sample to it. And this was the sample that I added. Right, so you can hear that that's got a lot of attack. And when I put the two of them together, and this is without any processing on it, this is just the, actually no, here, let me make sure this doesn't have any processing on it. I will turn off the processing on the bus, and this is the two of them together. Now it still sounds a little thin. What I realized was that the sample was out of phase. The polarity was reversed between that and the kick that I had recorded. So the first thing that I did was I put a trim plug in on so I could invert the polarity. And then I also added a little bit of processing, like I said, on the kick mic track. I put a little limiter and then a little EQ, and then I did sort of the same thing with the sample. I also put in this saturation. This is a free saturation plugin. At the time, it was a tube amp. You can't really get it anymore because now everything's gone up to like 64-bit plugins and all that kind of stuff. So that's not really available. But when I put the two of them together, and it really helped cut through the mix. The snare, top and bottom, again, sort of the same thing. You know, I put a little bit of processing on it. But it didn't quite cut through as much either. So I added a sample to that as well. And then again, just a little saturation with this tube plug-in here. Turn it off. Right, it's a pretty subtle effect, but it added just a little bit more attack. Now, the other reason why I was layering samples on here has to do with the way I edited the track, and that was sort of a problem. This was something that I look at it now as being a mistake. It seemed like a good idea at the time, and there are engineers who do this, but I think it was a little bit of overkill. And you'll notice here, this bright red track on the top is the kick drum. And what I did was I edited everything out. So everything that is between, you'll notice there isn't any bleed in this anymore. So I basically printed it as if it had a very extreme gate on it. So again, if I just solo up the kick drum and I turn off the snare, you'll hear that there's no sound between kicks. And you can hear that hi-hat kind of bleed through when the kick is being hit. You can hear the hi-hat come through. So there was actually bleed from the other tracks, but I just cut all of that stuff out. And it did kind of tie my hands later on when it came to processing and mixing, which was part of the reason why I added these samples after the fact. After that, there really isn't a lot that's terribly special about the drums. Let me go back to the sequence here, and I will call up the thing. So we've got, so after that, it's the toms. Again, I did the same thing with the toms where I pulled out. I just edited and cut out and then merged the track. And so the toms themselves also sound really clipped. Right? So there's no ring on those toms at all. And what that meant was that when I went to mix this, I had to rely a lot on the overhead tracks to get my drum sound on this. So, all right, so if I go back, let's listen to that tom part again. That's sort of where the ring is coming from, and then some of the beef and the initial attack is coming from the close mics. Right, but you can hear, like, especially when we get to that lower tom, you can hear how quickly that cuts off. Right, boom, right, it goes right away. But that was basically it. You know, we did a really good job. It was actually my friend Clark LaPlante. He's been a friend of mine since junior high school. And at the time, he was a touring sound engineer. Like, he really knew how to mic up a kit. And this is him playing on the drums. And he was the one who set up the plan for miking them as well. And so again, we were doing a little bit of experimenting, which is where we kind of came up with this kick sound, but we didn't realize until later that we didn't have enough attack on it. You know, this was after we tracked the whole thing and stuff. So one of the things I kind of regret is having edited these tracks the way I did by cutting everything out of them. Because I think if you were to have heard the whole thing, the real tracks, like you'd hear, I mean, they really did sound great. Like these overheads here, I mean, they're pretty clear. Let me just solo those up real quick. Oops. Right, I mean, that's just the raw overheads right there. They sounded really clear and they were really good. But we just kind of made that one mistake with the kick, with not having much for any attack in there. So I layered in a couple of samples to do that. After that, again, I had kind of a minimalist approach on this. The toms, I added just a tiny bit of reverb to them, just to get a little bit more ring time out of them. And then I had a room. I don't even think the room channel on here is really, where is it? Drum room, there it is. Okay, so let's take a look at this here. The drum room. Oh, I printed that too. How did I do that? That's kind of interesting. What did I do? Oh, you know what I must have done? I think what I did was I ran everything through a bus, through a reverb track, and then I printed it. And then I EQ'd it. How did I EQ it? I brightened it up a little bit. I pulled out some of the lower stuff. So this is what it sounds like without any EQ. So, and that basically, that created the whole drum sound. So that actually came out pretty good overall. That was fine. So now let's take a look at the bass guitar. I'm going to switch over here. I'm going to turn on my subgroups. Now, I have an interesting way of subgrouping my music. This might be of some interest here. I actually learned this from David Glenn at the Mix Academy, and he did it. As I recall, there was something about Pro Tools that made him come up with something like this, but it actually made a lot of sense to me. So what he does is I have the drums, and this is just the shells, right? So the snare, the kick, and the toms all go to one bus that I can EQ and put effects on and whatever. And then he's got a low end bus for the bass or any low synth elements. Then he's got all music for the guitars and other keyboards and things, all of the melody, which would be the vocals, although in this case I do something else with vocals, but your melody. And then he's got high end, which is where I put the cymbals and any other like really hissy sorts of sounds. So cymbals for the drums and those other really high pitched stuff. And then all of the effects get bussed, so you can kind of process them together. And then that leads into a submaster, where I will put, if I need to, I'll put additional processing. I was playing around with a bunch of stuff on this. Most of this didn't make it to the final mix, but I can use that to process it and test it and do different things, especially when I'm using reference tracks, because I can run the mix through the submaster and do some mix bus processing, but that doesn't affect the reference track, which just goes straight through the master. So I can level the two up. I can do my level matching, and I can use the reference tracks much more effectively like that. So that's how I go about the my bussing in my mixes. But looking at the bass, there are a few different things going on here. And again, I'm going to turn off this processing. So when I recorded the bass guitar, the bass, I really didn't know what I was doing there either. It was sort of a new thing. So I put up as much as I could, and I think I put about 6 channels of bass guitar down. We took a DI out of the bass head. The bass player, Jeff Sobin, phenomenal bass player, had a 410 cabinet, and I think I put a different mic on 3 out of the 4 speakers. And then I put a stereo mic, a Shure VP88, back out further from the garage, probably about 10 feet away. We recorded the amp in a garage, and used that to collect all of these sounds. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. In the end, I ended up using just the DI. I then used an amp sim here, and then I doubled it again to get a little distortion on it. So this is what the DI track sounds like. As a matter of fact, let me make sure I got my the right. Let me make sure I've got the right things here. Where are my tracks? There we go. A lot of stuff here. Let me get up the low end thing. I'll turn this off, get the low end on, and turn these off. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at the bass. This is just the bass DI. Now what I did on this was I used this to just get the low end. Okay, you can see here I've got a band pass thing. Where is this? This is, yeah, so I rolled off everything above 161 and then rolled off everything below 32 hertz. And so that's that. And what I did was I added an amp sim on top of that. Now this amp sim comes standard with Digital Performer. That's the one that I'm working on right now. So again, this is all I did was I copied the DI and then I put on this amp sim. So this gave it like a good mid-rangey quality that I liked. And so when I put the two of them together, right? And then I felt that it still wasn't quite cutting through the mix, so I added another track. Again, I just duplicated the DI track that I had, and I ran it through this saturation plugin where I got not a lot, but I got a fair amount of distortion on it. And especially for these slap parts, it really brings it out. And you can see I just rolled off everything below about 60 hertz right here. I was mostly looking to get, I could have probably gone more with that, but I also really wanted a nice fat sound, and that was this. And I really found that cut through the mix very nicely. You know, turn all this stuff back on. Right, so that was pretty cool. And the last thing that I added to it, although it doesn't feature very prominently in this mix, is a bass synth. I just put that in on some of the lowest parts of the main riff. And I actually rolled off a lot of the top end on that one too. You can see here it's everything from about 200 or so. Yeah, 222.3 is rolled off. And if I add that to the bass guitar, I got this. So it's kind of subtle, and if I turn off the EQ, actually it sounds a little better, but that's not the way I ended up mixing it in the final version. Kind of gives it a Terminator kind of vibe, which I like now, but I wasn't really impressed with then. I'm not really sure what that was. But that's how I dealt with the bass guitar. One thing I should also note is that when I was recording this song, and this factors into everything, I've talked before about knowing what the meaning of a song is, right? You hear a lot of producers and engineers talking about doing what's right for the song, right? Musicians, songwriters, you got to do what's right for the song. But very rarely do they talk about how to determine what's right for the song. And so the way I've figured that out is to really get into the meat of what the song is about, okay? And so ask a songwriter, what's the song about? And they'll usually give you a kind of a long description of what the song is about. So then you got to get them to just try to distill that to one sentence and then distill that to one or two words. And so brace yourself. This song here is a warning, right? That's what the song is about. And if I was going to elaborate on that a little bit, I would say that it's a don't mess with me kind of song. So it's not really bombastic. It's kind of a puffing your chest kind of thing. And so I wanted everything to sound very deliberate and very strong. And so that had an effect on how I recorded it. It had an effect on how I arranged it. It had an effect on how I mixed it, on how I edited it. Everything goes into the idea of how do I create this idea of strength, determination, and deliberateness, that I'm going to stand by my position and you better watch out if you defy me or whatever, something like that. Is a way of confidence is really the word that I'm looking for. It's a song of confidence. Don't mess with me because I could mess you up. And so, and not necessarily in a literal way, but in a figurative way, something like that. And so that's what I was going for. And so when I edited the song, I edited the parts really tight to the grid. And when I processed the song, I used only what I needed to get the tone to come across the way I wanted it to come across. And that all played a part in the feeling of this song. It's very deliberate. And so when you perform it right, really the loudest, most bombastic part of the whole song is the last chord. Okay, because that's sort of where the first punch is thrown. Up until now, no insults have been thrown, no armor has been chinked. This is all just sort of a preparation, so to speak. And so that's how I went about all of this stuff. So I stripped down and used only what I needed to get it across. And I think ultimately that's what I got with this bass tone too. So let's take a look at the electric guitars. Now, I don't have it here because I did it in a separate, I did it in a separate project altogether. I recorded the guitars, again, kind of like I did the bass. I think I had 4 channels for each electric guitar. I had the DI, and I had an amp that I mic'd up. I might have even had 2 amps that I mic'd up, and an amp sim. All right. But what I did after that was I blended them all down to just the one track. Okay. So all I have is stereo left and right rhythm guitars. I don't have 8 tracks of rhythm guitars. That would be way too much of a pain in the ass to deal with come mix down. Even this bass, like the only reason why I left 3 tracks of actual bass was because I was pretty sure that I could get away with just sort of setting the levels and leaving them. There's a little bit of automation on the lowest one. I'm not really sure what that's for. Actually, let's take a look at that. What is that for? Bass lows. There's some automation. Oh, and that's just to bring up one part of a fill, to bring up the low end of one part of a fill. So I really just tried to make it only what I needed. I really didn't want to add anything else. And these rhythm guitars are the same way. I put in the guitars, I mic'd them up with this sort of crazy way. These days, I really just prefer putting one mic in front of an amp or just using an amp sim and dialing in the tone that way, rather than doing a bunch of multi-mic setups. I try to get the right performance, the right amp, and the right tone with the right mic and just send it, with the right placement and get that and capture that. And that's kind of how I prefer to do it these days. But at the time I was experimenting. I didn't know what I was going to need, but I knew enough that I was going to need to bounce this stuff down because dealing with 8 tracks of rhythm guitars was going to be a pain in the butt. So if I bring this back, this is what the rhythm guitars sounded like without any processing. This was just the bounce from what I took. And the EQ on this is pretty minimal. I dipped out a little bit here. This is around 120. I dipped out a little bit more around 225. And I gave it a little presence boost up around 3K. And if I turn that back on, do that on the other side too. Turn it off. Oh, actually, I've got some, stop already. Actually, I've got some processing here on the main channel too. Let me get rid of that. So those are the guitar tracks without any processing. And then this is the EQ I put on the channel. Okay, again, pretty subtle, not a huge difference there. And then when you hear it again with some of the bus processing, which includes a little EQ again, just on the sides. This is a mid-side processor. I lifted the sides just a little bit, and then I added just a little bit more EQ. Apparently there was a resonance at 293 that I didn't like. And another little dip around 156 and just another little presence boost at 2K. And so if I put all that stuff on it, Right, you hear that when I put the bus processing on it, you notice that the low end cleans up a little bit. It gets a little bit brighter. And so it might even sound a little thin when you're just listening to the guitars. It definitely sounds richer when I turn the bus processing off. But I also wanted that to blend with the bass. Now, if I add the bass to that, I'll turn the bus processing for the guitars on and off, and you'll see it's a subtle difference, but I think it's enough to kind of blend everything together. Processing off. Back on. And back off. So you hear how when I turn that bus processing off for the guitars, it all of a sudden it just kind of gets kind of honky a little bit and sort of masks the bass a little. So by cleaning up that low end in the guitars and brightening them up a little bit, it gives a little bit of room for the bass to do what it needed to do. And I really wanted that slap part that Jeff Sobin put down. I really wanted that to come through. So I didn't mind if the guitars sounded a little thinner because I felt that they would blend together really nicely. Now let's take a look at the clean guitars. There's not much going on here. Honestly, I don't even know. I can't remember at this. It's been kind of a while. These might just be DI tracks. I don't know that I even bothered to put an amp sim on them or record an amp. It sounds something like this. Yeah, these are just DI tracks. Oh, I should get that synth out of there. I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, so these are just the DIs, compression to it. Not much though. It's about it's a 10 millisecond attack and about a 0.35 second release, 2-to-1, just enough to catch the peaks, I think. Yeah, just enough to kind of smooth it out a little bit. Nothing major. And I added an analog chorus. I don't even think I did anything. I think this is the default set. I had one of these boxes. This is modeled after a Boss. I'm pretty sure it's a Boss chorus pedal. It certainly looks like the one that I used to have when I was younger. And I loved that pedal. And I literally, sometimes I will just drop this in and its default setting is exactly what I'm looking for. It's kind of nostalgic in that way for me. So I did the same thing with this little cascading guitar part. This is just a fill, basically, that I pan to go across the left and right spectrum. All right, here it comes. Right, and that's it. Of course, the bass comes back in at that point. Let me mute him for now. And that's that. And I think, yeah, the only other thing I did just to get a little bit more oomph out of it was this sort of clean tone, this bass guitar, these ones that are holding the whole notes on it. Let me see here. That goes here. So this right here, I wanted to get a little bit more attack, a little bit more brightness out of it. So you can see this huge shelf that I have here. And if I turn that off, not bad, but again, I wanted the attack, so that gets up kind of bright. Synth elements. So one of the things that I put in there was this, it's called Glitch Kit. These are sounds out of Reason that I rendered. And that's coming through the, yep. Right, really subtle. Then I have some synth effects. I also have this impact sound, which comes in, I think, right away. Now, this impact sound, this one of the things, what I did here to get that kind of crazy delay sound was I'd set up in Reason 2 different delays. And I set the time on one to be quarter notes, and then I think it was quarter notes, and then the other one I set up to be quarter note triplets, and that's where you get that sort of gong, ga gong, ga gong, ga gong, where it doesn't quite line up. This is so let's hear that one more time. Right, it's got kind of a crazy sound, and then supporting all of that is this pad. And it's just going back and forth between like a G minor and a C minor chord. It's not a big thing. And then there's a little bit of EQ on each one, sometimes just to kind of roll off the top end a bit. This is the synth effects. This has a little bit more to brighten it up a little. This EQ here, again, just to brighten it up. This is the impact. So I pulled off the super lows and just gave it a little bit of a boost up top. And then same thing with the synth pad. Just get rid of the super lows and brighten it up a little bit on the top end, you know, and you put that all together. Now, because we're right here, I'll get into the lead guitar in a minute, but I'm going to skip over those for right now. What I'm going to do is I want to talk about the vocals. This is something that I don't really hear many guitar instrumentals doing a lot of, and I actually put a vocal part in here. It starts at the very beginning, and it also goes through this interlude. So let's listen to that, and then I'll tell you how I did it. And I tucked that all in there too. Now, that's actually all me. Every single voice you hear is done by me. And the way I did the various parts was I would change, because if you do recording and you've doubled vocals, you know that it has kind of a weird chorusing effect if you just double your vocal straight. So what I would do is for these parts, I did a few different versions where I would sing it in sort of a normal voice. So you know, I would hum the note and I would sing it in my normal voice, for example. Actually, that's not a good one. Like the tenor parts, the higher parts, I would do in my normal voice. And then the next bunch that I would do, maybe 3 or 4 of them, I did, if you remember the Adam Sandler sketch from Saturday Night Live, Opera Man, I would do that. So I'd make this really round sound and a big vibrato. So I get this, woo, you know, whereas the one before it would be like, ooh, right? Maybe a little vibrato, maybe not. And then the other one I would do would be kind of like, you know, holding my nose or something, making it really nasal sounding. You know, to kind of mimic the different sounds that you might hear in a choir in different voice types. And so by doing that, it would blend together in a way that I think really made it sound much more choir-like. And I certainly sound like I'm part of this choir, but I never really got the sense that it sounded like it was all me. Whereas like if you're just recording your voice and you're doing the same performance, it never really has that level of fullness. So if we go back, we'll listen to that one more time. I'll take the synth parts out and we'll just listen to the choir. As a matter of fact, I will, I'll turn the effects on there too, because there's some delay that I automate in on the tenor part. So let's check that out. That's just the delay from some melody guitars right there. So that was kind of a cool thing. And I thought, wow, that'd be kind of something different that I didn't really hear in guitar instrumentals, was actual vocal parts, right? It seemed like they couldn't mix them. It's like, well, why the hell not? You put solos in songs, right? You put guitar solos in songs, so why not put a sort of a vocal solo in a guitar instrumental? And so that's what I did. So now let's get, I'll turn those off here, and let's get into the lead guitar. Now, once again, the lead guitars overall, there really is not a lot to it. I have one guitar doing a wah melody. Oh, I got to turn that back on. Hang on a second. Let me get my subgroups here. I'm going to turn off this, and I'm going to turn that on. I'm going to turn the vocals off, and I'll leave the effects on. So I've got the lead guitar here, and it starts out with a wah, and it sounds like this. Now this was interesting too. What I ended up doing with this, as I said, I recorded the rhythm guitars by doing multiple mics and blending them all together. I did the same thing with a couple of these lead guitars too, and this wah was one of them. I recorded the DI and then reamped it, and I sent it through the amp, and that's actually when I recorded the wah part. So the DI was straight with no wah at all, and I just played the part. But when I reamped it, that's when I put in the wah, and I captured that. As a matter of fact, I think this was just my first pass too. I didn't really do anything fancy with it. But that's what the lead sounds like. And what I also added here was what I called lead guitar warmth. That's this thing right here. I busted out to give a little bit of to kind of boost the lower mid frequencies. I was trying to EQ it and it didn't quite work. So I boosted the lower mid frequencies and I added this tube whaler plugin for it. And so if I do this, let me turn this off for a second. We go back to the beginning. This is what that track sounds like. Okay, by itself, it's not much, but if I go back to the beginning and I turn it on and off, you'll hear it sort of thicken up the lead guitar a little bit. If I turn it off, back on. It's very subtle, and actually it works a little better, as I recall, with the other lead guitar in the other section, where I don't have the wah on it. It just adds a tiny little bit of girth. I don't even know if you can hear it, but that's one of the things that I put on. And this, same thing that I did with the wah. I did this basically in the same day. I recorded the rhythm guitars. I should say I reamped the rhythm guitars and the lead guitars all at once. There are times I add some doubles. Where's that lead guitar double come in? Actually, maybe it doesn't. Oh, it comes. I think it comes in at the end. That's where that comes in. Yeah, there it is. And then I also have some harmony guitars. And let me find out where those harmony guitars come in. They are... Okay, we'll get those, and there's that. And I'll hide that from here. Okay, so we'll listen to the harmony guitars for a second. And we'll bring this, that's here and here. Did you hear all that noise? This is from the reamp. Check this out. And then all that is, yeah, God, that noise, Jesus. So that, obviously, I just, sort of setting the levels and blending all of those mics together, and I probably should have edited that out, but it didn't seem to harm the recording any, so I guess that's why I left it in. So anyway, this is the lead melody. and I'm just playing that in octaves, and then I add this higher harmony, or excuse me, lower, and then this one. All right, there's that hissing again. And then I did, in order to make sure I got the timing just right, there's a whammy dive right before the guitar solo, and that sounds like this. And it was just so that I could get the timing right and really focus on that. And then the last thing I did, I actually brought this over from the demo. There's a part in the middle of the solo where I'm just really creating this noise. And I added a ton of distortion and wah and all this sort of stuff that was really easy to stack up in the demo. And rather than trying to recreate it, I just put it in this recording, and I flew it over from the demo, and that sounds like this. I mean, it's disgusting. What I'm doing is I'm depressing the whammy bar pretty much all the way and just shaking the middle strings with my left hand fingers as much as I can while I slowly release the bar. And then I'm also pressing the wah pedal very, very slowly as it climbs over that measure. And that's, pretty much how that goes. And then at that moment, the guitar solo switches from the straight sound to the wah sound. It comes into this part. Right, so that's where that comes in. And then I have, in the interlude, I have these little echo guitars here that sound like this. And then it comes over on the other side, the answer. Little whammy dive. Okay, and then we've got the melody, which of course is just a fragment of the main melody for the song. And this is how I build back into it. And then I've got these two harmony guitar parts that ascend the scale like so. Right, and so that brings us into the one of the last sections of the song. And then finally, what I thought would be kind of cool would be to take, when the main melody comes back one more time, I doubled the lead guitar, and I initially panned both of them hard left and hard right, and then throughout the course of that melody, I bring them to the center before it gets to this tremolo part at the end, which sounds like this. And that's the end of the song. So a quick thing, like I said, I really wanted to convey a certain amount of confidence in this song. So everything's very deliberate, and everything is sort of meticulously performed and then meticulously edited on top of that, which is why I think it doesn't necessarily sound like it's been cut to the grid. I've said before that if you're going to cut a song to the grid, really make sure that you've got good musicians who give very articulated performances, right? They've got to have accents from beat to beat. Otherwise, it does sound very metronomic. If, for example, you have a drummer who's playing the hi-hat in a very crisp way and this very tick, 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 tick kind of sound, when you do edit that, it's going to sound like a drum machine. But if you have somebody who's using a technique where they're putting a little bit more accent on the beats and a little less on the off beats, depending on the groove. Tick, 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 tick. It can survive the assault of such aggressive editing. But you can see here too, just looking at kind of these waveform blobs here, the beginning of the song is just the one lead guitar, right? Through the A section here and the B section, and then coming back into the A section's return. It's just one lead guitar on top of that. But in the second half of the A section, I give something a little different. I add the harmony guitars in to add a new layer to it. And of course, we get into the guitar solo, which always sounds kind of funny to me in a guitar instrumental because the guitar is always playing a solo, essentially. But again, it starts out with just that one guitar with the statement. And then in order to make things clean, like a clean switch between wah and no wah, I have that divided up on different tracks. I have specific sound effects put onto different tracks so that I can control them better. Obviously live, you know, everything but the actual harmonies is just played by me. And so, but in that split second of turning a wah on and then off again, you don't really notice that much in a live setting, but in a recording, it's very easy to that sound will just stick with the recording forever, right? It's always going to sound exactly the same. So I split it up so I could make it as clean as possible. And all of these harmony moments that come in, you know, like down here where we've got the interlude, I'm basically developing the idea of the harmony guitar parts that were here in the second A section. Now they get a little bit of time to shine on their own, okay? And then later on again, when they harmonize the that ascending scale to get back into the climax of the song, they come in, they have very specific entrances following the lead guitar. The lead guitar comes in first, a beat later the left guitar comes in, and then a beat later the right guitar comes in. And so they all harmonize in triads all the way up. And so that's a way, and then we split it up. The next B section is just a single lead guitar, then a doubled lead guitar because we've heard harmony up to this point. Now we've got just a single doubled lead guitar, and then we're back to the single guitar again. So there's a variation, there's kind of story that's being told in the arrangement of the guitar part itself. And it's just like going from the heavy electric guitars to the clean electric guitars, right? You can see here, I separated them. These blobs up here are the heavy rhythm guitars. These down here are the clean guitars. And I recorded them separately so that I could control their sound a bit better. But you can see here how it's all pretty heavy, pretty consistent. Then we drop the dynamic down and then we build it back up and then we take it to the end of the song, which is, to my ear anyway, the most aggressive part of the whole thing. So I hope you found that useful. There's a little insight into the way I used to track things. I do things a little differently now, but many of these ideas I still hang on to. I still use them. I still feel it's very important that you know what your song is about before you start the recording process, so you can start to plan some of these things out. And so that when ideas come up during the recording process, you can evaluate them a lot better, right? You can always tell when your idea is going to serve the song or it's not, if you know exactly what your song is about. So if you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments below. If you liked the video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you are not a subscriber already, please remember to do so if you want to see more content like this, and adjust your notifications to taste. I also want to mention that my friend Clark LaPlante, who played and helped me track the drums for this song, is available to do remote drum recording and song mixing, and I'm going to include a link to his website in the description below. So if you are working on your own songs, you definitely want to hit him up and check out his services, because you will not be disappointed, I promise you. In the meantime, I have been Kevin O'Shaughnessy. You have been awesome, and I will talk to you again in the next video.